I'm Joe Polish, president and founder of the Genius Network interview series and also Piranha Marketing. And I've got my co-host, Mr. Alex Mandozian, with me, and Mr. Brian Kurtz. We're going to get into some really powerful questions with Brian. What I want to do first is give you a little bit of background on who Brian Kurtz is. I'm going to read his bio just so I don't leave anything out. I've interviewed Brian twice in the past. He is a very good friend of mine. I've known him for several years. It's really an honor to have him on the call today. Okay, so Brian is the Executive Vice President at Boardroom, Inc. Boardroom publishes Bottom Line Personal, by the way, if you don't know. It's a $100 million plus a year business. They publish newsletters and books. They're located in Stamford, Connecticut. The company is recognized as an industry leader in both direct marketing and newsletter publishing. Brian is responsible for the mailing of over 50 million pieces of direct mail a year and the distribution of millions of other impressions in a wide variety of alternative media using the most innovative direct marketing creative in the industry. He's also very active in his direct marketing association. He's a member of a bazillion things, and I'm not going to list them all, Brian. You're a frequent.
No, I actually don't. I have a real job in addition to those too, which is amazing.
Yeah, I don't know how you can do all this other stuff in the midst of your very busy job, but nonetheless, you've spoken at many different events. You've gone to college, and so I won't even talk about that. You've worked in the direct marketing world for how many years now?
25.
25. All right. You're a member of the board of the Direct Marketing Foundation and a member of the DMA Ethics Operating Committee. And in 2000, you were inducted into the DMA Circulation Hall of Fame and at the same year voted List Leader of the Year. You're one of the smartest list marketers in the world. Absolutely. I mean, not only from my opinion, which, I only have my limited universe, but everyone that I have ever met that are big, huge mailers that know you, they all say the same thing. You are at the top of the game. You know the business inside out. You've, like I mentioned earlier, you oversee 50 million mailings a year. So in your career, you have just seen millions and millions and millions of mailings. You've been involved with Boardroom, and they are the largest consumer newsletter in the world, which publish Bottom Line Personal and many others. And having all of that background, all that knowledge, certainly would give you plenty of credentials to share with all of our listeners today, enormous amounts of secrets and value on direct marketing, direct mail, and just lists in general. So is there anything I left out?
No, you've definitely raised expectations to an unbelievable height.
Well, good.
And I hope I can deliver on it, at least some of that.
I want a little pressure on you here. So.
Yeah, I'm feeling the pressure.
Well, great. Alex, is there anything you want to add, or I'm going to launch right into questions?
Launch right in. We got a lot to cover.
Okay. All right, Brian, first question for you. Personal story. What's the real story behind how you first got started working for Boardroom, Inc. and in list management?
Well, basically, like most direct marketers, I fell into the business because direct marketing, when I was in college in the late 70s, there wasn't much. There was about a paragraph in my marketing book about direct marketing. I was an English major, which prepared me beautifully because I learned how to read and write. I wanted to get into the publishing business more than anything else, given that I was the film critic for my school newspaper. I thought I'd be the next Vincent Canby. I've told people I was voted most likely to become a list manager in my high school yearbook, which is not true, because I don't think anybody ever was. But anyway, I had gotten hooked up. I had gotten one job with a play publisher in New York out of college, and I hooked up with a particular headhunter who was supplying a lot of people to Boardroom and to Marty Edelston, and Marty was just building his business. And this guy met me for the first time, and we talked, and he said, "Marty will love you," was his comment to me. And, I look back at that moment. It's one of those telling moments in your career that here's this guy that knew that Marty Edelston and I were destined to be together in business. So the first job opening at Boardroom, once I connected with this particular headhunter, happened to be in list management. Again, talk about falling in on a number of levels. And list management is usually a function that's outsourced by most publishers. Boardroom just happened to keep the list management function in-house, meaning that if you wanted to rent the Boardroom subscriber list at the time or the book buyer list that we had at the time, you had to go directly to Boardroom as opposed to a company representing them. So they happened to have this list management department. I got there on March 30th, 1981, the day Reagan was shot in front of the Washington Hilton. And it was, he survived beautifully, and I did too. And it was an amazing opportunity that I was walking into, and I don't think I had any idea of the opportunity that I was walking into that day, because I really didn't know what a mailing list was. I thought a list broker worked on Wall Street. I just didn't have any idea of what this was all about. And after 25 years of doing it, I would say that, learning marketing and direct marketing from the list side of the business, from mailing lists, as opposed to some other direction, which a lot of other people get their training and have been very successful at, I feel that my training from that angle has been very, very unique and been one of the secrets to the reason why I've felt I can share so much and be able to do what I've been able to do.
Well, why is it that you and Marty, did this person say that you would just love each other? Because, knowing Marty, he's a pretty eccentric individual, and so I'm trying to figure out what that's all about. I'm
not eccentric at all. I'm very conservative, actually. But I think what he saw, which I didn't, and when I talk about some of my mistakes in my career, I'll talk about this one, so I won't want to give it away yet. But I think that he saw a guy who was very eager to do just about anything to get ahead, that I had a very much a sales component in me. I was very much a people person, which Marty was probably the best space salesperson that ever lived in the magazine industry. He's humble about that, but I know that he's the kind of guy that sits next to you in school or sits next to the office. If you're a sales guy, he's in the office next to you, outselling you every step of the way, and loving it. And I think this particular guy saw that I had a lot of that in me. I might not have been the entrepreneurial kind of guy that Marty is, the risk taker that Marty is, the eccentric that Marty is, but I had a lot of the qualities of curiosity, of never settling for second best, for just really wanting to learn and to be a sponge. And I was walking into not just a job that was going to enable me to do that, but a mentor who made sure that was the only way that there was to be.
Well, Brian, this is Alex, and let's talk about that for a second. If you're just following us, you just joined us for the Genius Network teleseminar, everyone who's listening, you can pick up the notes sheet. We're talking to Brian Kurtz, who's Executive VP at Boardroom Inc., and is in charge of all lists, and the next question is about list management. But if you go to Ask Brian Kurtz, that's AskBrianKurtz.com/notes, NOTES.PDF. We sent you an email about this, but if you haven't gotten it, please go there and pop open and download the question and note sheet, because it's all there, and we're going question by question. We just covered question number 1 on page 2, and question number 2 we'll get to. But, Brian, I want to wish you a happy anniversary, because I think your wife let you off the hook. You got 70 minutes with us today, right?
I only have 70 minutes because I have to get home for dinner, right? That's okay. Exactly right.
We've already taken a few, so now I think he's got approximately 65.
Let's talk about in-house list management, Joe and Brian. And, Brian, the question is directed to you. What is the biggest difference between working in list management versus working in circulation, and I think some people call it just marketing? And talking about Marty, why do you think he brought list management in-house? Because back then that wasn't a thing that a lot of people did.
Yeah, so let me go the first question first. And by the way, all these questions were submitted by people who are on this call. Is that correct, Alex and Joe?
That is correct.
So we are trying to talk to the folks that are listening in, so hopefully that these are the questions you guys wanted to get answered. Learning direct marketing from the list side was really, as I said before, a totally unique perspective. When I was voted I got that award for Circulation Hall of Fame, which I never understood. I was very happy to get it, and I was very honored to get it, but I never saw myself as a circulation guy. And circulation to me is magazine circulation. It's people who are very spreadsheet-oriented, very mathematical, which I'm not. It's a different skill set, very much. Not better, worse. I'm not making any value judgments here at all. But coming from the list side gave me a very unique perspective that was very different than all of my counterparts in the circulation part of the business, which I ended up being a part of once I got into more of the marketing side. I think that lists are the backbone of direct mail. I mean, people talk about, you read some of the textbooks in direct marketing and direct mail about, list being a third and offer being a third and creative being a third. And I think that list is bigger than that. I think that knowing who you're mailing to is far more important than what color the envelope is, so to speak. I'm being simplistic here to drive home a point that, the rule of thumb goes that if you have the best creative that you could ever put together and mail it to the wrong list, you're not going to get anybody to respond, whereas if maybe you have to pull back because of expenses on the creative, but you mail it to the perfect audience for that particular product or service, you will get some response and maybe even a successful campaign. So I think learning about segmentation, learning about customer behavior, reading everything about not just the list industry per se, which is a big part of it, but also what really makes people tick in terms of their response patterns, transaction data, learning a lot more about database marketing, which I'll talk about later on some of the other questions, was a very unique perspective to start from. Most circulation people get into all of that, just like I had to get into a lot of the circulation basics, but I think that very rarely did it go the way that it went for me. So it was very unique.
So in layman's terms, as a marketer, if I've never been in list management or even circulation, if I don't even have an in-house list, circulation is about renting lists from other people, whereas list management is renting out your own in-house list and generating income that way. Is that correct?
Yeah, those are the terms. Obviously a circulation person we'll say a circulation manager for one of our newsletters is out there looking for new lists all the time, and where they get those lists are from various list managers. That is correct. So it was I started more on a selling function than a buying function, but by studying everybody who was using our list, by taking a look, basically becoming a student of the mail, because I had to look at everybody who ever cleared an order for our list. I would look at their mailing piece. I started realizing that I was learning about creative approaches. I was learning about offers. I was learning about, copy platforms. I was learning about stuff because I was paying a much closer attention than just selling the list. And it was a very unique perspective.
Hey, was it you that sold to Vic Conant like 15 years ago, or vice versa?
I sold to Nightingale Conant. They were a huge user of our list. And I remember going in doing a presentation there and meeting Vic for the first time, and I sold lists to Vic Conant, absolutely.
Well, no, Vic was actually telling me, he's like, I remember 15 years ago being with him on the phone, which I thought was just hysterical. So there you go.
As far as list management and in-house, it's really been in-house at Boardroom from day one, and it was a good question when I saw it come up as one of the questions that was asked. Because I think, most companies don't do that. It's an outsourced function. You hire somebody who's an expert in it, who can represent a lot of lists in the marketplace and go sell your list for you and rent it to appropriate people. I think Marty's background as a space salesperson, and he knew going into the newsletter business that without advertising, since we weren't taking any outside advertising, that list rental was going to be an important income stream, so he wanted to keep his arms around it. I think that was one of the control issues there. But also, he wanted to protect this incredible asset. I think, and that's a very important item, and I think, Alex, you wanted to make sure I emphasize that today, that you have a lot of listeners on the phone who are just starting businesses and just starting to accumulate a mailing list of their best customers. And as we all know, that's gold. That's right. The most important, maybe the most important asset you have. You were mentioning to me in our pre-call, Alex, that, when you look at companies that are buying and selling each other, even though it may not show up on the balance sheet with a value, a company's mailing list is one of its most important assets, and one that a shrewd buyer is going to pay very, very close attention to as to what the makeup of that list is, who's on it, what they bought, how often they bought, and will they buy more.
Yeah, it's amazing, just general accounting principles. It doesn't show up on a balance sheet. It's a source of goodwill, but it probably is the very reason of existence for most marketing companies. And the reason I think I wanted to emphasize it so much, and you have, and I'm sure we're going to re-emphasize it throughout this call, is because you never know how valuable it is until you start cashing in on it. Yeah. And for those people who don't have in-house lists, and many people don't, because of many of the questions that came in through this worldwide survey, they said, how do I start an in-house list? And it's actually one of the questions later on. What can you tell them very quickly before we go to the next question? What's it like when you start cashing in on a list, whether you're renting it out or remailing to the existing list, for the first time? When you finally do that, what is that like? Because there's no list acquisition cost anymore. You got the list and you're making money from it. What is that like? How profitable can that be?
Well, there's another rule of thumb. It's in various direct marketing books. Is that it's always more expensive to sell a new customer than to renew an existing one. And renew here could mean selling an existing customer a second product. And I was going to mention this in that other question, but the other rule of thumb is that no direct mail business can survive without repeat business. So that understanding that you've got to have your business model set up well in advance of just that first product is probably the single most important thing you can do if you want to create a direct mail company and then create a database that has anything worthwhile to it. You have to be careful, too, because there's another rule of thumb that says every time you mail to that list, you may be taking response away for future offers. So you don't want to waste a lot of time with offers that aren't going to work. And so, therefore, every time you contact someone on your list, you want to make it meaningful. You don't want to – I hate to use the word over-mailing because I don't believe in it because I think there's no such thing. If you're giving your customers value every time you contact them and something that they want to hear about or something that they want, there's no such thing as over-mailing. But you have to be very, very careful with that because this is your number one asset. So what it's like it is cheaper because you have the name already. It is beautiful because you have somebody who's maybe wedded to your product line. They're wedded to your brand. They're starting to love you in a way that you never thought possible. But then you have this incredible responsibility to make them keep loving you and not flood them with junk. And, I'm not, while, we mail 50 million pieces a year, I'm not naive to believe that there are many people that never respond to anything we ever send them. So to say there's no such thing as junk mail would be naive, but I do think that, the more that you can segment and the more that you can respect your customer, the better off your business will be. I just wanted to finish that second question. We go on to the third, so I don't leave it to the person hanging. Another reason I think that Marty brought the list in-house was this value proposition, but also that later we're going to talk about using the list as a bartering tool, and that if it's that valuable, you can actually exchange it for other people's lists, and that's how you build your database even further at a much lower cost. And I think Marty wanted to make sure that we had that list close to our vest so that if we created those exchange agreements, we could do that quickly, efficiently, and with no, we'll call it any middleman. And also I think Marty loves to sell. He was a salesman his whole life, so that without advertising, we really didn't have any kind of a sales operation in the company, so I think he liked the idea of having one in the company. And I think together we've made list management very much an arm of our marketing and circulation department by having it in-house.
Great point.
Excellent. I'm so happy to actually hear you say, Brian, too, about you not over-mailing your list, that you can't do it as long as you're delivering value and basically bonding with your clients. It's one of the most difficult things that me and Alex are constantly dealing with people is thinking, can you over-mail, what's too much, all the various conversations that people have about how frequently you will contact someone, and it all has to do with the rapport that you build, the value that you create for them, and knowing how many mailings you've overseen. It's great to have you actually qualify and quantify that statement. All right, let's talk about mistakes and successes. Question number 3. What's the single biggest mistake you made during your early years, and what was your biggest success story that has had the most influence, that's most influenced your current business philosophy?
Well, I was thinking that. There were a lot of little mistakes, but I think the biggest, they all came under the same umbrella. The biggest mistake would be, I was trying to come up with a phrase for it, not understanding my true aptitude. And then by saying that, I mean that, that when I said that headhunter, you asked a great question before as a follow-up question, why did he think that Marty and I were going to hit it off, even though we're very, very different people? And I think that there were other people that were seeing my nose for marketing, which is a fairly large nose, but seeing my nose for marketing, seeing my propensity for looking at products and services in a way that most people don't. I didn't see that. I went to college. I was an English major. I thought I wanted to be a writer. Even when a year into my time at Boardroom, a job opened up in editorial. I went to Marty. I said, I think I'd like to take that job over in editorial. And he didn't say over my dead body, but he did make a convincing argument for me to stay where I was. And not knowing what you want to do when you get out of college, if it's not clear, I think you really want to go with that aptitude and listen to what other people are telling you. People who if you find 2 or 3 people you know and love, and they tell you something, you probably can chalk it up as the truth.
Right.
So I think that was a mistake, and also I almost made a big mistake of following the money as opposed to where that aptitude was taking me. When I started as a list manager in-house, early in my career, there was a lot of opportunity to make more money as a commissioned salesperson working for an outside list manager. I mean, a lot of people saw my aptitude for this, and they said, that it was a lot of money early on. It would have been a huge windfall. But I think I resisted ultimately, and I think it was about a year. Certainly I was already 2 or 3 years in before those offers started coming. And I think that in looking back, to resist the temptation to jump at the money when I saw that the progression that it was going so well, that I think looking back, I am definitely richer, obviously, in my skill set, my broader view of marketing. I mean, instead of just being a commissioned salesperson. I also would say that as far as the biggest success, and I think, having a mentor like Marty and then understanding the value of mentors, and because I've had so many in my career, Marty taught me early on, he said, if you only go around this world once, you might as well be the world's best. And, becoming the world's best at whatever you do is so key. I had mentioned to Joe, I'll do these really quickly, but I mentioned to Joe in my interview with him previously why I thought, what was in the philosophy of becoming the world's best list manager. And I had 5 items. The first one was, whether you're selling or not, everyone is a prospect in your education. So in my case, not only was it the mentors, but one of the things I did early in my career is that I went out of my way to meet the other list managers. Most list managers were only spending their time with list brokers or mailers because those are people they could sell to. Other list managers were people I couldn't sell to. But to me, it was to understand what they were doing well, what they weren't doing well, kind of learn from the competition and unlearn myself from the competition if I saw some things that I didn't like. So whether you're selling or not, everyone's a prospect in your education is number 1. Number 2, who is the smartest and most brilliant person in your field? Know and love that person and then find a dozen more. And I think I did that, starting with Marty, and I'm not going to mention all the names, but some might even be on this call today because I invited friends and family to listen in so I could let them know that I owe my career to them. Number 3 is don't be fooled that the basics make you an expert. You must go beneath the surface. I think this is all about curiosity and making sure that to be a success, that you must ask questions all the time. And when we talk about selecting a list, it follows perfectly there. Dick Benson, who's one of my mentors, one of the great direct mail gurus of all time, used to say, when I used to tell him how smart he was, not to brown nose him, but because he really was that smart, I used to say, how do you know so much? And he used to take his thumb and his index finger, put them an inch apart, and say, I know everything about this much. And, that's not a bad way to go through life. I mean, you want to expand yourself, and I'd say Marty would not have been satisfied with that, so he knows everything about this much, and my arms are now spread as wide as I could make them. But to know everything about this much, even if it's everything about a small area, is quite an accomplishment, and it's something that I think a lot of people should look at as being successful. And then number 4 is study the competition, know the competition, beat the competition, and in your case, Joe, eat the competition.
Yep.
I say also, and Marty would say, take the competition to lunch. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about sharing and why sharing is so important. And number 5, always know what the next step in your progression will be. So I think that's all caught up in my biggest success, which really starts with understanding how important mentors are and how important it is to not think you're smarter than everybody else.
Superb. Thank you. Alex?
Okay. Question number 4. We're on the note sheet. Again, it's at askbriankurtz.com/notes.pdf. We're on page 3, question number 4. And, Brian, the next question is about prospect evaluation. And it specifically states, what's the process you undergo when evaluating a new list management prospect or account? And I think the spirit of the question is, how do you, on the circulation side, how do you look for new lists? And on the list management side, how do you look for new prospects to rent your lists out to? So could you answer it in that fashion?
Yeah, I'm going to do an A-B. I think the question was more the latter question that you just asked, but I think it's too important to not talk about finding new names as well. In terms of finding new lists that work from the circulation side, I do a full day. I've done a full day session on that for the DMA. So I'm not going to be able to fit that in the few minutes I have now.
Hey, you can do that at my boot camp because I haven't even mentioned that yet. But everyone that's listening, Brian, Kurtz, and Alex Mandosian, and myself, of course, are going to be all at the boot camp on October 20th through the 22nd in Scottsdale, Arizona. Details are on your cheat sheet. It's bootcamp2005.com. That was a shameless plug for my boot camp.
And in beautiful Scottsdale, Arizona.
Exactly.
So if that's what those folks would want to hear about, because what I do is we put together a worksheet. I mean, Marty and I worked just many hours on the concept that we felt that in the list business, most lists, the language of lists is called data cards. So if you want to go out and rent lists, you'll get data cards, which will give you all the data on a particular list, how many names are available, what the different selection criteria are, how much it costs, et cetera, et cetera. And the problem with data cards is that they're put out by so many different types of people that there was never any standard, so that a lot of data cards had a lot of hyperbole in them, had a lot of stuff that was hidden, had a lot of stuff that was sales copy where it really should have been just data. So I did an article once that said data cards are guilty until proven innocent. And based on that, Marty and I worked painstakingly on a worksheet that basically, and the full day session goes through that worksheet of all the different questions that you need to ask to make sure that A, you're getting the right list, and B, even if you're getting the right list, what types of segmentation should you be taking based on what's either on the data card or what's missing from that data card. I'll give two quick examples just to give you a flavor of the kind of stuff that we would do. But for instance, we would require, if someone was recommending a list to me to mail for one of our products, and our list brokers who might be listening on the call know this for a fact, and they hated me for it, I'm sure, but we made them get us a copy of the mailing piece that particular that particular mailer used to generate that list. I wanted to see how that name was generated. Was it generated from a postcard mailing? Was it generated from a 16-page, Magalog, very extravagant mailing piece? Was it a sweepstakes mailing of some kind? Because that would tell me so much about the type of person on the list. Not good or bad, not a value judgment right off the bat, but if you're not doing that kind of research when you're mailing a list, then you're missing out on what really is on that list, because a list is just names and addresses. You can get names and addresses out of a phone book, and you can get names and addresses from a magazine subscriber file. You can get names of addresses out of a catalog, but they're all completely different, and one of the components of many is what was mailed to get that name. A second thing that we did on this worksheet, which I like to bring up, and Marty and I were most proud of this, was that we had gone all these years of making so many good contacts in the industry and making so many friends and sharing information and being very open with people that when a list manager would tell us that here's a list you should use, Brian and Marty, and here is a list of all the people that have used the list in the past. That's what we call continuation usage. We had the ability to call, we saw the list of the people who were continuation users. We had the ability to call some of those people and really see if it was true. We didn't ask them for their response rate, but we said, you were listed as a continuation user on list X. How good really was it on a scale of 1 to 10? Because they're claiming that you continued on it, and if you did, then I would definitely test it because you're a good mailer, and I think it would be it's a good testimonial for me. But very few people would ever, and the reason why I bring this up is that that's something that we had to do that was well beyond what was on the data card, which was just who used the list. So I think I've already given a very long answer to this, and it's a lot longer actually, but the process of mailing, because direct mail is so expensive, it's also the most powerful direct marketing medium, but it's also the most expensive, and that's why if you're paying so much to mail, and I think email marketers are really spoiled because they don't really care about the quality of their list because email is so cheap to spit out, and that's why I think with the quality of email lists is where it's at right now in the industry. And while direct mail lists have this responsibility to be a lot more higher quality and higher responsive and be able to make their case because people are paying $400 to $1,000 media cost and printing cost and creative cost to get that list in the mail.
Well, Brian, I mean, what I mentioned last time I actually interviewed you, because I've interviewed you once with Marty Edelston, and I've also interviewed you alone, and one of the things that we had talked about was just how much is involved in the whole area of list and mailing lists and direct mail, and just getting the listeners to focus on that is so critical, because this is such an important part of profitability in someone's list. And you take emailers as an example. I mean, learning all of this, learning anything at this level is going to make you a better marketer all the way around. I mean, the thing I'm always talking about when I do seminars is, marketing is two things, what you're saying and who you're saying it to. And the power of that list is so critical. And just to basically look at a list as, a bunch of names, and that's the criteria, which, believe it or not, I mean, a lot of businesses, that's their extent of knowledge that they have when it comes to mailing lists is ridiculous, especially if you're going to spend any amount of money on it whatsoever. And I've made probably 95% of all the revenue that has ever come into my business in Piranha Marketing has been done through direct mail.
Yeah, and I do think that I'm very proud of the fact that calls like this and things that we're doing in the industry, I think email marketers, I've seen some incredible stuff, positive, that email marketers are really starting to get a little religion when it comes to creating better quality mailing lists and what makes quality mailing lists. And just because email is a lot cheaper to distribute than direct mail doesn't mean that we don't have to have higher standards in the quality of the list. So I think we're doing a good service in that respect. Let me just answer that second part of the question, Alex, before I leave this. And just a quick thing on finding new users. If you're out there as a list manager or you own a list and you're trying to sell people on your list, one of the great techniques is to, I say, decoy yourself everywhere. Decoy, D-E-C-O-Y. And what I mean by that is be on as many lists as you can. Not just because you feel popular when you go to your mailbox every day, which I do, but you decoy yourself on everybody's list, and you get to study your mailbox, and this is one of Marty's rules of thumb, and why he's become such an amazing creative genius, is that he has studied his mail his whole career. Your mailbox is sort of the place you get your master's and your PhD, and in the case of selling, in terms of people to use your list, anybody who's out there mailing, if you're on enough lists, you're going to eventually see their mailing piece and say, hey, wait a minute, this is an interesting offer that should be of interest to my audience, and they've never used my list before, so clearly, this is somebody who I should prospect for my list. And then, of course, you have to sell to the list brokers and to the mailers, and there's a lot of traditional selling going on. But that's an angle on selling to new prospects that a lot of people don't do that I think is very, very valuable.
Great. Let me go on to question number 5, which is reliable resources, because it totally ties into everything you've just been talking about. And I do want to preface this by saying that we have people listening on the line that own small companies, service businesses, my carpet and upholstery cleaning clients that are in the professional cleaning industry, to people in direct mail that do tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. So we've got a whole variety of people that are listening in a variety of different businesses and industries. And so what are good resources or databases to search and find reliable mailing lists, either by topic or subject, when someone is just starting out?
Well, I'll give you for the person just starting out, and then I'll give you just a little bit, the next step up, so to speak, for a little bit more advanced. And those of the people on the call who are very advanced don't even need to hear the answer to this question, because they're already very advanced and doing it on a regular basis. But if you're just starting out, I mean, there are a lot of resources to find mailing lists. I mean, the ultimate resource is the Standard Rate and Data Service, SRDS as we call it, which is called, and this particular book under SRDS is Direct Mail Lists and Data. There's an online version, there's an offline version. The offline version is a huge book that if you're very low in your chair, you could sit on, and you'd be much higher in your chair. The book is structured so that you can look up categories of lists. If you're, depending on what product or service you're selling, it's pretty well indexed, and you can go to a lot of different places. And I know Alex wanted me to be sure to say that that's sort of the macro view of the list business. And then as you go into the various categories that you're interested in for your business, you'll see a lot of subcategories, which is where those lists are being housed, whether they're being housed by a list compiler, someone who's getting data from public record. And I think the next question is about compiled in response, so I'll hold off on that for a second. But basically, it tells you exactly where to go and get the list, who to contact. And I think that if you're just starting out, making a lot of phone calls and learning by asking a lot of questions is not a bad way to go. I think, though, that next level up is when you start getting into the situation where you're big enough, or you're going to start being big enough, where you're going to mail enough names, where you can go to a list broker, and those are all listed in the SRDS as well, and you'll find list brokers by category, so you can find one that might be more suited to the business that you're in. And what a list broker does is that you would go, as a mailer, you would go to a list broker and say, I'm looking for names in a particular marketplace, a particular category, and then the list broker would come up with ideas as to where the best lists to get for you are, and it's more of a one-stop shopping as opposed to for you to have to go to various vendors of lists. You get the list broker to go to those vendors for you. Those vendors are then called the list managers or list compilers. Wherever the list broker has to go to get the list is where the list is housed. But as a mailer, then, if you're working with a broker, you can have sort of one-stop shopping in your list buying needs, so to speak. So that is the crux of it. This is all part of a one small piece of a full-day seminar, and even after the full day, there are still questions. But the list business is complicated. It's one that can be learned by a lot of practical application. I think that doing research, asking questions, learning about what questions to ask is critical. The sources of lists, how often a list is updated, very, very important. So you know how many, and some guarantee on deliverability if you're using compiled lists. So I think the short version of that answer is, SRDS for the small guy, finding a good list broker for the next small but not tiny guy.
Gotcha. Hey, can you comment on this too? Because when I was first starting out in my small business, and I learned about the importance of direct mail and just lists in general. I mean, I never even knew it existed when I first started in business. My brain didn't even think in this way until I started reading marketing books and going to seminars. I've gotten an enormous amount of list education by going to the library and looking through SRDS, which you can find copies in the library. Now SRDS online, I believe, is srds.com.
It's standard rate and data service, direct mail list and data. We probably could have gotten some URLs for people in advance, but and there are some other people doing the same kind of stuff that SRDS is. I'm not here to plug SRDS or someone else, but I think if you do a Google search on mailing lists, and you can find some other sources as well.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I would go to the library and I would just ask the reference librarian to show me different, books that they would have and different forms of lists that are available in the library in any city. And, it's amazing how much a reference librarian knows about marketing but doesn't really know they know that much about marketing because they don't know that information for the application to sending out direct mail pieces, whereas you can go there and take what you're talking about on today's interview and look through a few things, and anyone that just needs a little bit of a list education can, after listening to this interview, if you lug yourself down to your local library and just look through SRDS or some of the books there, you can find an enormous amount of resources, and it's definitely worth everyone spending an hour or two if they are brand new to this to get an understanding of just how many lists are out there, what types of lists. It is absolutely amazing. So I just wanted to add that.
Good idea.
Thank you for adding that, Joe. And question number 6 on page 4, Brian. Before I dive into this, just one mention, you talked about email marketers, and I found in my own experience as an email marketer, when adding, fax broadcasting to the people who I can fax broadcast to and has given me permission, direct mail, postcard marketing via direct mail, using as many dimensions as possible with communicating with prospects and customers as much as possible, as often as is testable and possible. I found that I got a lot less of a suppression of response than just going one-dimensionally, either through direct mail or through email. Have you found that to be the same experience when you cross over from email to direct mail? All of a sudden, that prospect or the client is saying, "Wow, this person exists in multiple realities," and all of a sudden, there's a response rate of an increase. Any experience in that regard?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, the buzzword around town these days in direct marketing circles is integrated marketing. And you have all these tests. We've done a test where we sent a pre-email to people who were going to get the direct mail. We've sent post-email, of email addresses that we have, of course. And we've seen lifts in response by doing pre- and post-emails to direct mail customers. I think that one of the other interesting integrations between email and direct mail in particular that we found is that, I always thought that once we got into email marketing that shorter would be better, and that if we were going to sell somebody one of our products, giving them a landing page and an order page would be just about what we would need, and anything more would be redundant. And just the opposite is true, that best packages we've used in direct mail, the 16-page tabloid, very long direct mail, converted to email, 16 pages worth of email, outpulled by a wide margin, shorter 2-page email if it's already been tested in direct mail. So there's incredible synergy, integration, ability to increase response rates, ability to have different touch points, but you also have to know your audience. I mean, we happen to have an older audience, so I don't think we have as many people online as some other audiences might. That doesn't mean that we don't use email when appropriate. And then you have customer service aspects,
right.
Email for renewal of subscriptions and that type of thing. I mean, email for customer service questions instead of using the telephone. So, yeah, tremendous amount of integrated marketing going on, and that's not only is that not going away, that's going to be increasing at an incredible pace.
Yeah, I'm curious to learn more about that. I'll be talking a lot about integrated marketing at Joe's Marketing Boot Camp. To get the information about the boot camp coming up in October, just go to bootcamp2005.com. Can't be easier than that. bootcamp2005.com. Let's move on to the sixth question, which is a question that's been asked over the years of direct mail and direct response marketing, and that is the difference between compiled versus direct response lists. So in your opinion, what is the difference between a compiled and direct response mailing list, and any secrets of making compiled lists pay out, Brian?
I'll give a lot of people some good takeaways if they really don't know the difference. The quick definition for me, compiled is usually from public record, they're names that are of a certain type, of a certain place, of a geographic is a big factor, but most of the data you have on the people is because you have that data based on some kind of a public record of either where they live or something that they've done that is public record, mortgage purchase, house purchase, driver's license information, etc. Response lists, the broad category, the broad definition would be owned by a list owner or a mailer. And then the key component of a response list versus a compiled list is that they've proven that they respond to something. So let me just go over some quick benefits or characteristics, and I'll give you the difference between compiled and response list under that characteristic.
As well as adding in the B2B versus B2C characteristics, if there are any differences between the two.
Okay. On responsiveness, the term responsiveness in the compiled area, you usually will sacrifice total response for a different kind of reach. That you want to go to a certain geographic area, you want to go to certain people who have a certain profession, but you're going to sacrifice total response because you're just getting them from a public record, and there's no guarantee they responded in the past. Whereas in the response arena, in terms of responsiveness, response lists will usually outperform compiled lists by a substantial margin. Now, I could say that in the B2B market, if it's a very targeted offer to a very targeted audience of people who are in a specific industry and there are no response lists available, then the responsiveness of the compiled list could be quite high. So I don't want to say that compiled lists are not responsive, but I wanted to say in comparison they usually are significantly below what a response list is.
There's no behavior that's tacked onto them, whereas direct response is actual behavior no matter what they're responding to, correct?
Right. So, for instance, I'll give a weird example, but if you wanted to market to architects and you had a compiled list of architects versus a response list of people who subscribe to Architects Weekly, I made that up, and paid a subscription price for Architects Weekly, I think the subscribers to Architects Weekly for another direct mail offer are going to outperform the compiled list of architects by a wide margin.
Okay, so let me give you another example. Let's say that you have a catalog you're about to mail out. You've done everything. You've got all your creatives done, and you're down to the list. And you got two lists that you're looking at and evaluating, and both are about the same cost for some reason. One is a compiled list from department stores of people who have bought high-end soap, but from department stores, just compiled from that group of people who purchase from department stores.
At least they did make a purchase, which gives you something, but not
right. Right, a compiled purchase list from department stores. And then the other list is just a list of catalog buyers, not product specific, but just catalog buyers, and they are direct response buyers from catalogs. Now, this really puzzles a lot of people, but in your opinion, having been in the business 25 years, which list will outpull the other if both are affordable? And if you had only one choice to make, which one would you choose?
Well, assuming that the catalog list is not for farm equipment and that it's for at least household items or something in the close to the category, my guess is that you're going to do better with the response list.
I love that. So it's not always product specific as it is behavior specific.
Right, but I think that there is a time where you'll go too far afield and response list is not the key component.
Right.
Just some quickies here on compiled versus response. Information. Compiled list, there's a wealth of information, and sometimes you get a compiled list and you're only using the compiled list for the information that's on it, whereas a response list you're rarely using for information only, and you're using it to make a mailing to them. Selectivity on compiled lists, usually you get good demographics regarding companies and individuals, especially in the B2B market. In selectivity on response lists, you're getting good psychographic information about individuals and their lifestyles and their buying habits, and buying habits being the most important. Demographics are sometimes overlaid onto response lists, but selectivity is key on response lists in the area of buying habits. Universe, meaning how many names are available. Compiled lists, a lot of times you'll get a lot more quantity over what I'll call quality, but quality not as a value judgment, quality as it pertains to buying habits and responsiveness. And so on response lists, usually you get less quantity in a particular selection, but the buying behavior determines the existence of the list, on the list.
It's a lot more lasered in on the buying behavior, correct?
That is correct. Cost, compiled lists are usually a lot cheaper. Sample mailing piece, if you rent a compiled list, sometimes you don't have to show them what you're going to mail. A response list, you almost always have to show them what you're going to mail to the list because it's being monitored by a list owner who owns the list. And I remember what I said before about the list being gold.
Mm-hmm.
Minimum order, a lot of times compiled lists, you don't need a minimum order. Response lists, you do. Cleanliness, meaning, deliverability of a list. Compiled lists, much harder to keep updated and clean because they're from compiled data, whereas response lists, because you have a subscriber list or a catalog list and it's being mailed to regularly, the addresses are going to be more updated. So when you're asking about guarantee of delivery, you want to get a guarantee of, on a compiled list, you could end up with a tremendous amount of undeliverable addresses. So you want to make sure that the person you're buying it from gives you some kind of guarantee and some kind of credit if there's more undeliverables than they say. So those are some of the overall. I want to try to get to some of these other questions. So that's a good overview of compiled and response lists, I think.
Joe, we're on page 5, question number 7. It's all yours.
Okay. Seasonality, this is what this is about. Based on your experience, Brian, are there seasonal patterns with mailing lists that pay out, and what are historically the absolute best and worst months to mail?
Absolutely. With some products, there's absolutely seasonality. We have one. We have a tax newsletter. We know that it's going to mail much better right after the summer, near Labor Day, and then again in January, February, in time well enough before tax preparation, but soon enough that people are just getting around to getting to their W-2s. So there are certain products that just fit with certain times of the year. But for information products in general, my experience is there's not a ton of seasonality. You have to be careful with things like planning in advance. Like if we do a lot of gift mailings, for instance, and if you're going to have somebody sign up people to give gift subscriptions, you don't mail that in December, as you might quickly realize people are planning their gifts way before that, and we found that doing gift mailings as early as September are much more profitable than going later in the year. So those kinds of things are things that you know and you learn and you work with consultants, and it's very important. But some basic tips about seasonality and stuff that has worked for us over the years is that I think whenever you think about dates that you want to mail, try to think in terms of an in-home date as opposed to a mail date. In the old days, when direct mail was a lot smaller and you could make deals with postmasters all over the country by giving them nice Christmas gifts, and they could get they could time when the actual mailing piece would actually hit the home. You can't do that today with the bulk of third-class mail that's going through the U.S. Postal Service. However, if you start getting a sense for how long your piece it takes for your piece to get delivered, whether you mail first class or third class, you work backwards from that, and you really want to work with an in-home date. When do you want, ideally, you as a marketer, when do you want that piece in the hands of your prospect? We try not to hit holidays head-on, and I'll give you an example. This time of year, for instance, we would much rather mail either July 31st or September 1st rather than August 15th. The reason for that is that August 15th is going to hit either like right before, the in-home will be right before Labor Day, and it may be jumbled in with a lot of other stuff, whereas a 9/1 mail date will certainly come in after Labor Day, after the hubbub of a holiday. So, and that goes for Memorial Day, July 4th. We find that that's been a pattern that's worked very well for us, that going the end of the previous month, but not in the middle of the month when there's a 3-day holiday at the end of the month. December and January are traditionally very good months. I think, there's always that sense, obviously diet products and people making New Year's resolutions and the whole concept of people starting anew when it comes to the end of the year and the beginning of a new year. December and January have always been very powerful mail dates for many, many people, and why so many more people mail that time of year. But I think it's very important, too, as you get into the direct mail business over a long period of time, that you keep very good records of every time you mail, of every mail date you have, of every in-home date by tracking when the mail got delivered. And then when you start seeing over 2, 3, 4 years certain periods not being as responsive as others, and you thought that other periods that you weren't mailing to were what you call black periods, test into those black periods. You can do all sorts of timing tests where you can take a mailing. I'll use the example I just gave. You could mail the mailing on July 31st, but then hold out a piece of that mailing and mail it August 15th, and prove to yourself that even though you lose a little recency on the names on August 15th, you'll find that if you don't find a drop-off in response, that you can actually see that maybe August 15th is not a bad mail date for your particular product or service. So I think the big issue in seasonality is to test, there are certain times of year that might be suitable for your product, and then never walk away from a time of year forever. That once something proves bad, don't assume it's bad forever. And that the beauty of direct mail is that you can test back into a certain time of the year or test out of it.
Gotcha.
You were going to say something, Joe?
Yeah, what's funny is when Brian's talking on his line, he doesn't hear when there's when someone else is talking. You got that very special phone there, Brian?
Oh, good.
I was trying to blurt in and interrupt you right mid-sentence.
I did that. No, it's only for you, Joe. I don't like to hear you.
I think that's a perfect line for Joe. That phone is perfect. It's like the anti-Joe interruptive phone.
Yeah, I agree. What I was going to say is everyone that's listening, there really is one very special day to mail a certain type of thing, or at least to be aware of a certain date, and that's on February 4th. And I think everyone really needs to write that date down because that is my birthday. So if anybody's going to send gifts or anything, that would be a really good time to do it. But actually, I'm just going to do a tester, Alex, and we're holding me to this. On February 4th, we're going to do something totally amazing at geniusnetwork.com. And so everyone just mark that date down.
It's my wife's birthday, too, Joe.
That's true.
It's Amy's birthday.
Yeah, it is. So this is a very special day. Well, now at least you won't forget this either.
I won't.
Now that I know I think it's going to become a national holiday.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping it will. But nonetheless, everyone mark that down. Look at geniusnetwork.com on February 4th, and you'll see what will happen. Okay,
and one thing about testing seasonality, Brian, I don't know if you'll find this interesting or not, but we found when I was in infomercial marketing, in television and also in email marketing, we found that December 26th through the 31st is a really, really, really good and profitable couple days or few days to mail out because everyone's home, number one. And number two, we don't know why this happens, but it's always been great for me. The rates are really low because no one's buying media at that time. And so the combination of low media rates and response that isn't too suppressed because everyone is home versus like July or August, we found that is like a secret week that we have used and made a lot of money on. So you got to test, as you've been mentioning throughout this call, and we found that to be a very interesting week for electronic marketers anyway.
I would echo, Alex, that it's sort of like what that particular week works as is almost like Memorial Day right after Labor Day within a week.
Right.
Not much bigger holidays, of course, but so what we've been able to mail from December 21st all the way through, past New Year, and all of that's been a good mailing period. Whereas in the past, you could make the case that we can go a little bit further back in December because of the power of that week. So we've seen some power in that week in direct mail too.
Yeah, it's less marketing noise. You're not competing with as many packages coming into the house, and it's a very, very interesting time. So testing is definitely key. But as far as in-house lists, Brian, this is the number one question that came in, and that is question number 8. What are the most common steps to starting and growing an in-house mailing list from scratch? And what would you do? I mean, many people know that Boardroom is a huge company. I think they rival any company in the world for revenue per employee. And you have many, many big lists, some of the largest lists on the planet for consumer subscription lists. But many people don't know that you start up lists as well. And so do you go through the same process in starting up a new in-house sub-list or a new type of customer base? What would you advise anyone starting up their own in-house list or sub-list for anyone listening right now?
Well, my wise guy answer as far as starting and growing a list would be, have a great product that everybody wants and buys, and then you'll have a big list. But it's really not about launching a list. It's more about the product mix that you choose to market. And in Bob Stone's book, which is probably considered the Bible of direct mail or direct marketing, I think it's called Successful Direct Marketing Methods. I think it's in the 7th edition.
Yeah, I read it. You wrote the epilogue, I think.
No, that's our book. But
yeah.
Bob Stone's book I used as a textbook when I taught in college for direct marketing. Mm. And one of his rules of thumb is no mail order business can survive without repeat business. Mm-hmm. And so when you start thinking about building a list, it's really about what's your product mix going to be. I think anybody who's in single product direct mail may get a quick hit, may get a nice windfall, but to go from having a small little house file of some sort to a real database of buyers and prospects and people that are into your brand and your product line, you really have to start thinking about what do I need to do second, third, fourth time out to get their interest, to keep the interest flowing, and that's how you really create a list. So the advice I would give is that if you're starting a business or you're in a small business, think about the progression of mailings that you're going to do way in advance of after you mail the first product. And there's a term that we use in direct mail and database marketing called contact strategy. And then, because you can get very sophisticated in, well, I have 12 products. What order should I put them in? Mm-hmm. Should I offer them product A, B, C, or should it be A, C, B? Based on what the response rate patterns are, and all of that is testable in direct mail. But I think the big issue is, you need to have a great product, you need to find the right list, you need to do all the things in terms of list research so that when you do a launch mailing for a new product that you're going to the right prospects, they become buyers. Once you have those buyers, as we talked about already, you want to make sure that what you renew them on is something that they want, what you deliver to them is high quality, and then you've already got your second, third, fourth, and fifth products lined up so that now you're building this database of people with multiple transaction data. And the key to a powerful in-house list is multi-buyers, people who buy again and again. You don't get people to buy junk again and again. You get people, I guess some people do, but that's not the business I want to be in. I want to be in the business of giving them what they want and also what they would expect from our brand.
The book I was thinking about was Dick Benson's book.
Dick Benson's book, yes. He has a rule of thumb that's close to that.
Yeah, I think, to paraphrase, he said something like that the second-time buyer is so much more profitable than just a one-time buyer. So if in my world, if we chase the buyer for a second time and get a rebuy, then that person becomes so much more of an asset to the company than just the first-time buyer. So it's the second sale that we're chasing, and especially with magazines, I think that's the name of the game, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And, I'll even give general advertising a plug here. The really good car manufacturers, for instance, understand that once you buy your first Toyota, I got to try to make you a Toyota buyer for life.
Right.
And so, the concept is not new, but in direct marketing, creating the promotions and the list segmentation and the marketing plans well in advance of when you're building your business is really the key.
Well, one thing before we go to question number 9 with Joe, Brian, and that is with autoresponders, which I have a lot of experience with, going for that second sale. Typically, most of my colleagues, and I'm just as guilty of it sometimes, there'll only be one autoresponder after a purchase for the first time, and that's thank you for buying. And there'll be maybe 20 autoresponders going over the course of 50 days or 90 days for people who are prospects and haven't purchased once. When in fact, if you just look at the client and the person who's purchased once, there should be a string of autoresponders getting that second and third and fourth sale, but many times that doesn't even exist when you look into the autoresponder sequence. So we can learn a lot from direct mailers in the internet world. We get lazy because everything's so inexpensive, but in just looking at every email being worth $1 and maybe every email costing us $1 would sober us up and start having some sequences on, like you say, setting it up so they get the second, third, and fourth purchase.
Yes, I agree with everything you said.
Okay, we're ready for question number 9. All right, we're going to scream through these, Brian, because of time.
Okay.
Barter strategies. What are effective marketing strategies to obtain highly qualified mailing lists without rental fees?
Well, there's no free lunch, just like there's no free lists, but you got to have the goods first. So having a desirable list yourself opens up many more exchange opportunities and the possibility to barter your list for other people's lists. And then the name of the game is to mail as many names as possible at the lowest possible cost to build your own database with outside lists, because it's outside lists that are going to start going to become your new in-house customers.
Right.
So it's not without rental fees, but you're trading a valuable asset for another. And so how do you make your list desirable? Well, your demographics. Is who you've got, who you want. Have you stumbled into a mailing list of people that happen to buy your product but really are not the qualified people that stick around for a long period of time? And so then you have to rework your marketing materials to make sure that you are getting who you want. I think also, as far as bartering strategies with your list, it does enable you to, when you have a good list that's a very high responsive list that can transcend into other categories. For example, if you can find a good catalog list that has executives on it. I'll throw up an example. So, say Sharper Image would be a high-ticket, affluent catalog buyer, and our reader is a affluent, business person. We might not be able to pay for each other's lists, but by exchanging with each other, it does bring the list. It brings the list cost down to a manageable dollar amount, and therefore you're able to get into new categories of lists that you might not have gotten into. And one thing on barter with lists, the base price of the list which is totally arbitrary. It's set by the list manager because that's what they feel like charging. The list is worth what it's worth to you. So, I think this speaks to question 12 a little bit about, how do you handle a list partner whose list doesn't work for you? Well, then you don't exchange lists with them. But you exchange with people that you test first. You find out if the lists have compatibility, that you're willing to go name for name, that your list isn't worth more than mine, that they're equal, and then you set ceilings and you monitor that very closely. And that's making your list management part of your marketing and your circulation.
Great. Thank you very much.
Now, this is question number 10 on page 6 of the notes, Brian. We talked about this in preparing for this call, and I was very impressed by the concept, and I can't wait to utilize it myself in my own business because I never thought about it this way. But this is a business mindset that you adopted, which is what you call the 100%, 0% business mindset. What is that all about, and how has it influenced the growth of boardroom sales and list rental revenue as you've affected that revenue, having worked there for so long? I
think that, it started much more as a more personal philosophy than a business philosophy, but it certainly transcends very much into the business world. And I'll give you 3 quotes that got me to this spot in my career. The first is from a postcard. It's kind of a demotivator postcard. And it says on the outside of this postcard, it says, dysfunction, : the only consistent feature of all of your dissatisfying relationships is you. Number 2 is a quote that I heard from a seminar I went to, which talks about being peaceful. And to really be peaceful, you need to be accepting, and you need to give up there is something wrong here. Like, people who walk into a room and assume something's wrong until they're proven that something is right is something that I can't live with. So those 2. And then the third quote is share, that's fair, which I think I used in at some moment with when my kids were babies. So the concept of being willing to share to the max. Don't look for equal value every single time you share. Like, I'll give you one piece of information if you give me one, but I'm not giving you my second till you give me your second. I'm exaggerating that to make my point that you can't start thinking about that life is way too long. Marty has a great expression. You know, people always say life is short. Marty still has an expression which I use all the time, and he says life is long. And life is long in the scheme of how long we're on the earth. And you may get burned once in a while by being an oversharer, and I have, believe me. I've gotten burned by giving up a lot of information and not getting enough back in return, so to speak. And then I eventually walk away from those relationships. But I do, as you know, I told you and Joe, I do sleep very well at night, knowing that I'm out there. I know that what I get back is so much more than what I give. Even if I had to put a tally on it, I probably am at a deficit. But to me, it doesn't look like a deficit at all. And so, you know, I think in personal relationships, if you know this whole idea of I'll meet you halfway, you know, I think in business sometimes you have to, and sometimes it becomes a monetary situation, and you don't want to get ripped off. But I think there's a spirit of 100-0 that I'm going to put my cards on the table. Again, I'm not talking about a negotiation to sell a business where, you know, there's lawyers involved and it's a legal issue. I'm just talking about day-to-day business dealings with people that 100-0 works quite well for me. And well, as I said, while I've gotten burned a few times, I do sleep very well at night.
Very accountable too. Like if you own 100%, then you're not expecting anything from the other end. So it's a clean way to live too.
But yeah, you have to. Yeah, to go with that theory, you can't have sour grapes all day about how you didn't get your money's worth.
All right, thank you, Brian. Question 11. We got questions about house list conversions. So what are the best 2 or 3 tactics to convert lists or sub-lists you rent into long-term house lists?
Many of the things I mentioned in question 8 about making sure that you got your back-end products in line way before you mail your first one, you have the right progression of products, and you have a real contact strategy is critical for this. I would also add, on the way this question's worded, I would also say that, you know, making sure that you have the right offers, the right pricing, the right step-ups. That, again, remember I said before about you're going to get the people that you deserve based on how you're selling to them and how your offer goes out to them. So track everything, store everything. Database, you know, the cost of storing data today is as cheap as it's ever been. So once you're developing a mailing list, don't be chintzy with the ability to save all transaction data. Transaction data, which is a terminology that we use in database marketing every day, is the single most important thing when looking at the value of a list and looking at the value of a name. So you must track everything and store everything. I think also that if you get sophisticated and get a few steps ahead, the whole concept of doing modeling of names, what we call regression modeling, and without going into details here, what that is, instead of ordering lists off data cards, you start ordering lists by mailing a certain amount of them, taking a look, because there's so much data on those names, taking a look at the people that respond to your offer, and then building a model against a much bigger database based on the criteria of the names that already responded. It's a very, very sophisticated modeling technique, but can be done by a lot of mailers that don't have to be all that sophisticated. They just have to be willing to spend a little extra money on modeling instead of just what we call recency, frequency, and monetary value of names, which is basically off the data cards. And also, I think, keep in mind that a phrase we use here a lot is the control package is your enemy. Whatever business you're in, small business, big business, whatever you're mailing out to people as the vehicle to make your sale, to get your prospect to do something, is your enemy in that it's always beatable by something. A different price, a different offer, a different premium, a different headline, a different envelope, a different color. So the control is your enemy. So then by changing it and testing against it, it doesn't take a lot to change response rates, and then it doesn't take a lot to break into new list universe with these new creative approaches, and therefore your house list becomes something much different for the long term based on how your marketing materials go out.
Right. I love that, too. The control is the enemy. That's great.
The control is the enemy. And talking about partnerships and relationships, which, Brian, you're obviously very good at and has been a huge influence to your success there, boardroom and in any type of list management, I guess, is question number 12 deals with partnerships. Now, let me see if I can extract the spirit of the question. The question is, how do you handle a new list partner relationship after your list rental has had a low response rate? So to paraphrase, let's say, you find a good list partner and you're renting the list to that partner and there's no response. So do you go back to the well or what do you do in that effect? Or is that a trick question? What is it?
Well, no, I'll answer it as best I can. I handled it mostly in question 9 because if it's if it's someone you're exchanging lists with, chances are you already had tested each other's lists, you already had made each other's lists work, then you rolled out a little bit, but you set a ceiling as to how far each of you could go so that no one's going to get hurt too bad if the response starts waning. However, if it's not an exchange partner, but someone who's using your list or you're using a list and it doesn't work, then it's all about segmentation. It's all about what other selections might be available on that list that could put it over the top. Now, there are situations where lists just aren't going to work. You try them, you test them, they don't work. In fact, Dick Benson used to tell me that if you rented 20 lists and they all worked, then you probably didn't test enough lists.
Right.
And if you tested 20 lists and only 2 worked, then you're not doing good research. So it's somewhere in between. I don't know if it's to a third to a half of all your new list tests should work to some degree. And then you got to take a look at the other 2/3 or the other half and say, what else could I do to some of those if they're close to put them over the top? And that's where you work with your experts, your list brokers, the list managers. Maybe it's that you need a different kind of recency. You need people who have bought in the last month instead of the last 3 months. Maybe you need home addresses only. Maybe you need men only instead of men and females combined. Maybe you just need multi-buyers, people who purchase more than one product. And you may pay a premium for that, but it may be worth paying the premium to get the response rate up. So it's really all about segmentation. And then, of course, if the list shows some promise, then you can get into some of the modeling things that I mentioned before.
Great. Okay, last question. So we're at the final stretch here. So this is the bonus question on page 8. Brian, knowing what you know today about list management, rental, and marketing, what would you have done differently to have accelerated Boardroom's business growth even faster?
Well, playing to the audience, Alex and I are going to talk in the near future, because I probably should have talked to him 2 years ago about how we were going to do teleseminars profitably for our company. So I think teleseminars is a fantastic thing. So that was a little joke, but it's actually true.
Hey, it's a real deal.
We're doing it right here, right now. I mean, teleseminars are awesome. Our clients.
Medium. I think it can work even in our B2C environment. So Alex will have a different discussion there. But I think that to answer the question specifically, I think that one of the turning points for me, and we could have done this a lot sooner, Gordon Grossman, one of the great direct mail consultants of all time, who we still consult with, said to me one day, and this is after we had published a lot of good books, mostly from greatest hits from our newsletters, compilations of our stuff, and we sold hundreds of thousands of books, and we're doing great. And Gordon looked at me one day and said, what makes you think that all of your new products have to be from your existing editorial? And so, right under my nose was this idea that said, we know how to market, we know how to find product, we know what works and what doesn't work. We don't have to just use our own greatest hits. We can go out and find other people's greatest hits and use our marketing machinery and put that and we've done an amazing job of that in the last 5 years, but my guess is we probably could have done it 5 years earlier. So I didn't know that soon enough. So I guess the lesson would be that don't just make assumptions, that don't stay insular. Assume that you can go outside and you don't have to make everything. You can buy a lot of stuff around the corner, which is certainly one of Dick Benson's credos. Also, I think we could have been a little bit faster in database marketing. I think, again, Gordon Grossman sent me a memo probably about 12 years ago saying if you're not in database marketing in 10 years, you're out of business. We got into it within 3 or 4, but I'm guessing we probably could have been into it sooner. And then I'd also say the power of research. I was sort of anti-research, being a seat-of-the-pants marketer and being from an entrepreneurial company. I used to poo-poo research, but there's a lot of research that really pays out. To really survey your customers, you can do a lot of research to find out what they want in advance. Seat-of-the-pants marketing can work, and you can get lucky, and you can have some amazing successes because you're an incredibly instinctive marketer. However, I think you can also shoot yourself in the foot, and that shooting from the hip has its downsides. So while I don't want to have the research take over the execution, I will say that we got into research late. And right now I can say, looking back on the research we've done in terms of surveys and concept tests, that most of our successful new product development is a direct result of the great research that we do in advance of that.
Gotcha. Well, excellent. One thing that we're doing right now is one big giant research process. This is a Ask Brian Kurtz Genius Network teleseminar. We did a national survey. Actually, we even have people on the line from Australia and the UK that have listened in tonight. So tonight in their part of their neck of the woods, and daytime depending on what part of the country someone's in. But basically, this was one big dialogue process where we got questions submitted that people wanted to hear from you. In this case, an expert in mailing list and direct marketing, and we are hopefully fulfilling what it is that they wanted their questions answered for. And one thing I do want to mention too, Brian, giving opportunity. Boardroom is a phenomenal company. The newsletters you guys publish are awesome. I'd like to give you an opportunity to, I'd want to give our listeners an opportunity. I always know you do a soft sell job of promoting Boardroom, which is very nice. However, I want you to tell the listeners, if they do want to subscribe to Bottom Line Personal or any of the other newsletters, where do they go? How do they do it? And I just want to preface this by saying you should just be on Boardroom's list just to get their direct mail pieces. You can get an education in marketing because you have some of the world's greatest copywriters writing copy for you. Let me see if I can say that right.
That's correct.
And so, everyone should really just be on your list that has anything to do with marketing whatsoever. So if you can give out some websites, contact info, that'd be much appreciated.
Well, let me give you what's free first, because that'll make me feel better. You can go to our site, bottomlinesecrets.com. There's a Buy Now button, but before you go to the Buy Now button, there are some buttons on the homepage to subscribe to our 2 free e-letters. The first e-letter is called Daily Health News. Daily Health News, daily in Connecticut is 3 days a week, but we have 3 unique e-letters a week on state-of-the-art health information, up-to-the-minute stuff. We also embed some ads in there, which offsets the cost, but you don't have to buy anything, and it's great editorial. And then we also have another e-letter called Bottom Line Secrets, which comes out twice a week, and in there we use repurposed content that has appeared in our publications before, reformatted, updated, so it's a little greatest hits tidbit kind of thing. And those 2 e-letters you can sign up for free. Bottomlinesecrets.com is the website. If you go to the Buy Now page, B-U-Y Now page, you will see all of our products there, all of our books, a lot of health books, our flagship newsletter, Bottom Line Personal. We have 4 other newsletters, 2 in the health category, 1 in tax, 1 in retirement. And I would also, this particular audience, I would put your eye to 2 particular books on that list. One, we republished 2 marketing classics. So we did it more, Marty and I did it more as a service to the industry, but we've actually done pretty well with them because there was an incredible amount of desire for these books because they were both out of print. One was a 1966 book that Gene Schwartz, the great copywriter, wrote called Breakthrough Advertising. We saw it on eBay for $900 and realized we better republish it. So we have it for $95 on our website. But it's one of the great books on creative ever written. We haven't changed one word of copy from the 1966 version. We've added foreword by Marty, and it's a fantastic book. The other book is the book that you've quoted here, Alex, today, Secrets of Successful Direct Mail by Dick Benson. Also went out of print, and it's a fantastic book. We've had a lot of other web entrepreneurs plug it for us because they know it's such a great book. Ken McCarthy, a great friend, has done a great job. Did an interview with me just about Dick Benson. So I would put people's eye to those. One thing I'd like to ask you guys, if they go back to the Ask Brian Kurtz, can they put in feedback from this teleseminar so that if we ever do it again that we know, or is there some way to get some feedback?
Sure there is. The easiest way to do that is to send an email, a direct email, to Joe's assistant, which is Gina at joepolish.com.
Okay.
Gina at joepolish, POLISH.com. We're going to have some follow-up survey pages online that will go straight into the Ask database that we can make sense of that, but that'll start next month. But for right now, don't wait. Just give us some feedback on how you felt this call went, you felt it was on target, and how you felt it went along with the note sheet. So again, Gina at joepolish.com. And you walk the walk, Brian. You're doing what you've been espousing the entire call. Is getting feedback is so important. So
yeah, and people can be really free. I'm not going to take it personally. I think that your concept of getting the questions in advance. Most people, if they didn't submit a question and then say I didn't answer their questions, well, they don't have much of a complaint, do they?
No.
And then they'll be in the dysfunction mode of having a dissatisfying relationship with me. The consistent features of that would be them. However, the people that did submit their questions, I certainly would want to know if they got their questions answered. And also, I think in the future, if there are a lot of other questions that didn't get answered, that, we could do this again. So, I do like to make sure that when we do things like this, that we only do it better next time. Marty has an expression on his stationery. It says, good, better, best, never let it rest till the good is better and the better best.
Yeah, I love that. And he has it on those big, huge, oversized pieces of letterhead and everything that he sends me in.
Exactly.
Very cool. Well, Brian, let me also mention to all the listeners, you are going to be at my boot camp live speaking, which is awesome. This is going to be so great. This is going to be such a cool boot camp. We've got Alex Mandozian there. We've got David Bach, who wrote The Automatic Millionaire, David Allen, who wrote Getting Things Done. It's going to be incredible. So
David Bach's a contributor at the Bottom Line. Fantastic financial guy.
Yeah, absolutely. He's great. I've done a Genius Network interview with him, and of course, it's just going to be an awesome boot camp. And you've been there before, so you know how cool they are. And I want to give the website out to all the listeners. It's on the last page, page 8. It's bootcamp2005.com. It's October 20th through the 22nd. It's actually going to be in Scottsdale, Arizona. And you can go to the website, get all the details. And we are going to change the website around next week. We have an early bird special rate on there right now. If anyone actually goes there and from this particular call and sees the early bird rate and registers, we'll actually honor that price until we change the website, which will probably be changed on Wednesday next week. So anyway, that is it. Any last words, Brian or Alex?
No, I found it to be a privilege to be on this call, and all the hype that you gave me, and it made me feel good, and I hope that I delivered some value for your audience. And I just think you guys are two of the most fantastic marketers I've ever met.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, and you certainly delivered as far as I'm concerned.
Well, one thing that struck me is just getting to know Brian. I'm going to get to know him better and better at the boot camp. And
you get us into the teleseminar business.
Well, hopefully we'll do that. The thing that honestly and authentically, what really struck me is how much of a people person you are. And I always thought of list managers as things people or mathematicians, and it's either working or it's not working. And so much of your 100%, 0% philosophy is about people and how important it is to give first, and not only give a little bit, but give all of you. So, I've looked at list management and from a point of view of math, which, you can't deny the arithmetic, but more importantly, it's really a people business, and that's the one thing that has really stuck out for me personally, Brian, since we have gotten to know each other more and more. So I'm looking forward to getting to know you better, and I think you hit one out of the park today. I appreciate you for it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys, and to all our listeners, thank you so much for being a part of the Genius Network interview series, and check out geniusnetwork.com, and you can always see the upcoming interviews. And Alex, if you want to give everyone details on getting the transcript of this call and everything else, go right ahead, and then I'll let you close it out. Thank you, Brian.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, everybody. And remember, go to www.bootcamp2005.com. Take advantage of the early bird, and look forward to our next Genius Network interview. We have one next month, but we also have one tomorrow with Vic Conant. We talked about Vic, and anyone on this call is eligible to attend that bonus call tomorrow. It'll be playing twice, once at noon Pacific and once at 6 p.m. Pacific. Of course, just add 3 hours for East Coast, and you will hear Vic Conant live. It's an exclusive interview. We've never done a teleseminar with Vic before, and you'll get all the information via email if you haven't already done so. Remember, give the feedback via email today, tomorrow, the next day to Gina at joepolish.com, GINA@joepolish.com. On behalf of Joe Polish, Brian Kurtz, and myself, Alex Mondosian, we wish you good sales, good luck, and we hope our paths cross again soon. Bye-bye, everybody.